Hello everyone, I am back to take a deep dive into this photo. We're gonna deconstruct the heck out of it, show a bunch of contextual images that happened before and after this, and go through the full edit in Lightroom. This is all in an effort to just bring back sort of YouTube video tutorial things into the basics of just like how the craft of photography typically unfolds in a really realistic way with a minimal amount of emphasis on, reviewing pieces of equipment or lenses or things like this. This photo for me has always kind of surprised me as a standout in terms of what everybody else seems to like in my work. I really dig this photo, but it's not what I would say is my top 10 favorites even, but it always does really well anytime I post about it. And I think one of the reasons there's a disconnect there between what everybody sees and likes and what I like is this whole entire wedding day was one of my favorites ever. The entire shoot was essentially at night after dark. It was a New Year's Eve wedding in Detroit. So the sun sets very, very early in the day that time of year there. And it rained on us most of the time. And so many of my favorite photos from this couple were actually during the, walking from one point to another in the rain, those candid moments of the couple just kind of like trying to keep themselves shielded from getting wet and things like that are actually some of my favorite photos. This one happened in a much more controlled environment that was obviously shielded from the rain. This is actually just a walking tunnel between a building and a parking garage. And the lighting that you see is just the light that was there. And I was holding a prism underneath my lens. So this was shot on the Canon EOS R. I'd probably only been shooting with that camera a few months at this point. And the Canon EF mount 24 1.4 at f 1.4, 1/250th of a second, and ISO 3200. Obviously, this image compositionally is very, very satisfying and balanced. These lights at the bottom are all from the prism being held underneath, reflecting the lights that you see on the top. That was all just there and done for me. I didn't have to do anything other than recognize the opportunity of showing a reflection, a nice balanced reflection of the lights. Now, here's a key point. At some point, I'm probably going to write an entire article or video specifically about prisming because my first article is over like 14 years old at this point, and it's time for an update. But anytime you have a significant amount of dark shadow or just black darkness in your frame, that is a prime real estate to add a reflection. So it's not sure dark shadows, but underneath them was generally a darker area. He has black pants on. The light wasn't as bright because all the lights were coming from the top. So it just trended to be darker at the bottom, which when you add a reflection on top of something really dark, really pops. So that is one thing that led my mind and imagination into thinking, oh, I should add a reflection on bottom of it. We'll get into Lightroom in a second. I did take photos without a reflection and got a variety of different poses with them, but this was the most straightforward composition, which clearly really resonated with people. There's not much else to say compositionally other than things that I actually don't like. The weird black tarp here, I think, is some sort of masking work so that the whole tunnel doesn't leak when it rains or something like that. But I actually don't really like that blackness. I would like it more if it also went down all the way here and filled out these spots. So then it was like a true like 50-50 masking of in between the steel beams or whatever, blackness on one side and open air on the other. But I actually really dislike the fact that that sort of tape, whatever black tarp thing is there. I wish it was gone. And I'm not going to go through and like edit that out. I probably could using generative fill these days, but I'm just never going to do that. It doesn't matter because the light is really what makes this image sing. Pose wise, I just went for something really balanced. Again, splitting right down the middle of where this black tarp is, just because it is there, trying to balance the couple there. And then I didn't do a perfect job of using the prism at a totally balanced angle. It's offset, swooping a little bit down this way. If you really pay close attention, it's not a perfect, reflection. But let's get into Lightroom, see how the raw file looks, and give some more context into what was happening before and after this. And then I'm probably going to kind of walk through how I'm re-editing it, based on my current preference and trend. So here's another photo. Another reason why I loved just this whole wedding day so much. This couple just made each other laugh and were just really, it was raining and dark, and they were totally soaking it in and just going with the flow, and it just made everything really fun fun. They brought a couple umbrellas, which is always useful. The editing style, I trended a lot more black and white because of all the mixed sort of green casting fluorescent lights. But there's plenty of space for some color photos, especially where I had a little bit more control. I'm going through here and applying kind of my current editing preset to some of these as we get going, just to see how it does. It's always interesting. I always loved the color tones of the Canon EOS R. It was one of the big reasons I decided to switch from shooting Nikon. Anyway, so another cool spot where reflection was just really easy and obvious. Some black and whites of us walking from one place to the next, and then we get to this really cool tunnel leading right away with just the reflection. We'll come back to the final edit in a second, but just want to show, here we go, another one without reflection, and then I did some of the two of them. These edits, by the way, are just the automated edits. These aren't the final of what I deliver to the clients, just because I'd like to show my preset is applied, but it's not tweaked in any way. I like to show sort of what I'm dealing with in these deconstructions in like a raw state. If I were to dive in and edit a photo like this, I would definitely, let's see, apply my current thing. I'm going to juice the contrast a little more and then go, yeah, probably something like that. Now, because these are fluorescent lights and there's like a weird green hue masking everything, it's one of the rare times I'm going to get into the color mixer and get rid of this like weird greenish aqua cast. But that looks pretty good to me. I really like it. And maybe some dehaze since it is sort of hazy up in there. Yeah. But let's get back to the original RAW file of the original photo. And let me take it back to reset. Boop. All right. So this is it. It took a little bit of work to get it to its final state, which is boop here. So a little bit of transform adjustment, and I used what ended up being generative fill to connect between where his head is being reflected and where the light streak continued, because that like breaking up, it's in an awkward position on his body, but I really wanted that to be one continuous line. So we'll get to that in a second. This is the starting phase of what the edit would have looked like, and just adding my preset on top of that, bring in a nice amount of exposure first. I always adjust exposure first in order to, because as you shift exposure, it's going to change things in the saturation and just overall color intensity. So I'm hyper focused on skin tone when I adjust exposure, even if it's blowing out other parts of the frame or underexposing other things of the frame. I'm hyper fixated on exposure until the skin tone looks right, and then massage the raw file back from there. This has a billion gradients. I'm not going to redraw all of them, but they're mostly, just darkening gradients to bring in a little bit of focus, around the couple. And then, like I did in that other example, color mixer, we're just going to get rid of a lot of the green, maybe even some yellow here. Yeah, just to get rid of that like kind of ugly green cast that the fluorescent lights are bringing. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of dehaze across the whole thing and juice my little, oof, look at that. That looks awesome. The difference between not using my LUT at all and using my LUT. I'm saying LUT, but it's actually just a custom camera profile. That looks pretty great. And then editing it in Photoshop, I've done this a few times now. It's very seamless now. This is I would say, perfect kind of use case for something like generative fill, where my original photo, I actually clone stamped just this section to go a little bit further. And you wouldn't notice unless you were looking really closely. But with generative fill, it's like nearly imperceivable. It's quite perfect. And I love using generative fill in a way that, stays faithful to the original constraints as to like what you were working with. So yeah, there we go. That's the end result that I am really, really happy with. Now there's one final step. Anytime I really think the photo is going to benefit from it, I'll save it as a PSD or a JPEG, bring it back into Lightroom, and you can automate all of that process. It's not a big deal at all. I actually have it saved here. Let's see if I go to my raw file, export as JPEG, re-import for finalizing. So that literally takes the edited raw file, exports it in the same folder as a JPEG, and then re-imports it back into the catalog right alongside it as a JPEG, which is really, really nice. So that's what you're looking at here. And then I add what I call the JPEG finalizer, which just literally adds a little extra layer of my LUT, making it very exaggerated just to show you. But JPEGs respond very differently to RAW files. And I really like this little like finalizing plugin just on top of that for some images, not all. But this one is just so kind of sci-fi and abstract. I think it really really fits well. So that's really it. Again, just looking at the metadata, this was the Canon EOS R within a few months of when it was released. The Canon 24mm at f1.4, ISO 3200. I didn't use any noise reduction on this. 3200 is certainly a capable, clean noise range for that camera. And yeah, f1.4 with the prism held right underneath. Hopefully you got something out of that. I'll be back soon with more. And as always, thank you so much for your attention. Bye, everyone.